Welcome to Westminster Watch, and I'm Nick de Bois. On this week's show, well, there's been a lot going on, like what's happening in Scotland.
I've concluded that repairing our relationship across the political divide can only be done with someone else at the helm.
It's a change at the top, with First Minister and SNP leader Humza Yousaf resigning after dramatic U-turn lost him the allegiance of the Green Party. And there's more change in England, with local elections and a by-election. We'll find out what they might tell us about the parties and places to watch ahead of the general election. All that to come after what has been a testing week in politics for parties, politicians and voters across Britain. So let's start with Scotland. Humza Yousaf has only been First Minister for a year. His party, the SNP, controlled the Scottish Parliament in a power-sharing agreement with the Green Party. But when the SNP U-turned on a key climate policy, that started a bitter row and the partnership collapsed. The Greens then teamed up with the Conservatives, Labour and the Liberal Democrats to start a motion of no confidence. Rather than wait to be voted out, Mr. Yousaf resigned.
I clearly underestimated the level of hurt and upset that caused Green colleagues. And while a route through this week's motion of no confidence was absolutely possible, I am not willing to trade my values and principles or do deals with whomever simply for retaining power.
So what happens next? And what does it mean for the United Kingdom? Let's speak to SNP's Stephen Bonar, the MP for Coatbridge, Christon and Bellshill. Stephen, thank you for joining me here on Westminster Watch. It's been quite something to watch as events within the SNP and the leadership have unfolded. But what's it been like for you as an SNP MP?
Well, first of all, I can appreciate how it probably has been quite a time for any political observer or indeed journalist. But for us in the party, it, of course, has been quite a difficult time over the last period. First of all, I would like to give Humza Yousaf, the outgoing First Minister, my very best regards and thank him for the work that he did for both the party and Scotland as a country. It's not been an easy time for parliamentarians such as myself. The trouble that the party has been under for quite some considerable time has been difficult for us to deal with. But we do see a new horizon coming forward for us, a fresh start under John Swinney, a very competent minister, of course, with an illustrious political career. So for me personally, I have only joined the party in 2014, and it's the first real time in that time. The SNP has been a political juggernaut since the referendum of 2014, and this is the first time we've really come under some considerable pressure internally.
You pay tribute to Humza Yousaf as your former leader, or soon-to-be former leader. But the reality is, do you not hold him accountable for just rash judgment in the way he exploded the agreement, the coalition agreement with the Greens, if you like? Is there a sense of, that was a daft move to make?
Well, there is different opinions within the party. I think a lot of people within the SNP think that the Butte House agreement had come to a kind of natural end. Of course, it's for Humza himself to explain and just how the nature of how that played out. Perhaps he would say himself that could have been held a little bit better in terms of the communications with the Scottish Greens. But the opinion within the party is that it was a decision that had to be taken, that it was the right decision to take. But unfortunately, you can't legislate for how other political parties are going to respond to that. And of course, we've seen the Greens say that they would not support a no confidence vote. Now, instead of putting the party and the Parliament through that, I think Mr. Yousaf took the very humble decision to step aside for the good of the party and for the good of the country. So that's what he's been done in terms of the handling of it. there's loads of different opinions across the party and, of course, out with the party. But that was the decision that was taken. It was Humza's decision to take, and he took it in the manner that he saw fit.
I know you're very much a constituency-minded member of Parliament as well, but for these last few days and weeks in many respects, some would say, we've seen obviously the chaos of your former chief executive, Peter Murrell, now charged with embezzling money, only charged. You know, the husband of your former, regarded very strong leader, Nicola Sturgeon. When you've been on the doorstep, is there a sense of embarrassment to see your party embroiled in financial sleeve and political chaos, which is something you've never had to deal with in the past?
You're right there. We've never had to deal with anything like that. And me personally, I've never had to deal with anything like that. And ultimately, individuals are responsible for their own actions. It would be wrong of me to comment on any ongoing case. You've mentioned the case about the former chief executive. There is an ongoing police investigation into that matter. So, you know, in relation to that, I wouldn't like to comment any further. However, it has been a difficult time. There is nobody within the SNP denying that has been a difficult time. And wherever wrongdoing is uncovered, then it's only right that wrongdoing is prosecuted properly.
I'm just conscious of time, but that's a really important point. You've talked about the SNP as a juggernaut, but now you are proposing, under a new leader, to effectively run a minority government. The SNP called for a Westminster election when the Tories changed leader twice, but you're not going to do that now, are you? You're going to anoint your own leader. That's hypocrisy, isn't it?
The difference there, I would suggest, is that the first leader in that situation, Mr. Boris Johnson, was letting, to quote, let the bodies pile high. He was...
that's irrelevant, really, isn't it? It's the process.
Well, it's not. And second to that, Liz Truss crashed the UK economy. So she wasn't in office very long whatsoever. But the process that you're saying is indeed the process. We can have a debate about how the... parliamentary procedures.
But it's a debate you caused.
Kingdom, or how democracy works. But such as the political procedures and the parliamentary procedures as such, it's up to, listen, anybody in the SNP can put themselves forward to be the leader of the SNP.
But the people of Scotland won't have a choice, Stephen. That's the point, isn't it?
No, it's not, because the political people that they represent into the Holyrood chamber will have a choice. Every party can put forward their nomination to be First Minister. So the Conservatives and Labour will put forward their leaders against John Swinney, and the Parliament will vote our new First Minister. Now, given the arithmetic, we're quite confident that the new First Minister will be John Swinney. However, each party represented in that chamber will have the opportunity to put forward...
OK, Stephen Boner, for time reasons only, thanks very much in joining us here. Let's move on to our second topic, the local elections. Voters have had their say in electing thousands of councillors as well as 10 new mayors. Our correspondent, Alex Barker, joins me in the studio. Now, Alex, at the time of recording, the results are still coming in.
That's right. We've had just over half of the results, so let's have a look at what sort of picture that's painting so far. If we start with the councils, this shows you which parties had majorities in councils before the elections. Most of them are either blue for Conservative or red for Labour, a fair bit of yellow for the Lib Dems, and these white gaps are where no one has an outright majority. Now, if we bring up the results so far, Labour have gained 5 councils and the Conservatives have lost 4. But in terms of individual councils, the Conservatives have actually lost more than 200. I'll just whip through the mayoral elections as well. So there are 10 elections for mayors. Only 2 were previously Conservative, but there are 3 brand new positions to fight over, and that's the light blue colours you can see. Now, for the results so far, the Tories have held on to one of theirs, at least, Tyne Tees, that is theirs, and Labour look on track to keep the others. But I have to say, what you can't see here, and what's really interesting, is who is expected to come second in some of these. We've got to talk about Reform UK. That's what used to be the Brexit Party. Politically, they're most closely aligned with the Conservatives, and it's largely their votes Reform are claiming. So much so, some polls have them pipping the Conservatives to second place in Greater Manchester and North Tyne. Not only that, but they also came third in the Blackpool South by-election. Now, Labour won this back from the Conservatives with a big old swing of 26%. But again, look at that reform result, only just third and only 100 votes or so off the Conservatives. Now, you can't say that all this is an exact indication of what might happen come the general election. There will be differences in voter turnout, for example, and the kind of issues being campaigned on, but it's a pretty decent way to take the temperature of voters across England.
Thank you, Alex. And I'm joined now by former Labour MP Graham Allen and Paul Scully, Conservative MP for Sutton and Cheam. Welcome. Graham, let me start with you. It's looking like a great result for Labour. How do you feel?
I think it was anticipated, given the unpopularity of the government. I think the thing now is that Labour have to be really serious in these remaining few months about getting its clearer message over to the electorate about forming a government. It's very different if you're going out locally to vote for your councillors or mayors or whatever. Forming a government is a much more serious matter. It's no disrespect to local government, but people will want to hear all the arguments from all the parties. And Labour have coasted into this massive victory. Now they've got to turn the ignition on and start telling people exactly what they're going to do when they're in government, hopefully before the end of this year.
Paul, let's turn to Blackpool South by-election. It is a disaster for the Conservatives, a 23.5% swing or thereabouts against to Labour. Were you expecting this?
Yeah, I think it was. To be fair, I think the whole evening the day was a bad day for us, which I think I'd largely priced in. But I think in Blackpool South especially, it tends to, if you have an MP that's done something stupid, like Scott Benton had, he was caught in a sting about lobbying, then you do tend to get punished at the by-election afterwards. And I think the Reform Party, who came really, really close to knocking us into third place, I think are that sort of repository for angry voters on the right, whereas the Lib Dems tend to do that service on the left. On the right, it tends to be the Reform that don't really have the solutions, but will get out there and be ready to beat the Conservatives with a stick. So we've got to learn from that.
Well, the thing I would say to you, you're absolutely right that there were some, pretty appalling allegations made and which led to the Conservative MP standing down. That certainly doesn't help, but it's not an isolated case, is it, that can be simply explained away like that. I think this is the fifth by-election where Labour have seen over a 20% swing. Now, Project Rishi Sunak is all about narrowing that gap with Labour. He's failed, really, hasn't he?
Well, look, I think what's happened over the time that Rishi has been Prime Minister, he's had his head down, set these 5 pledges, the problems that he wanted to solve around the economy, the NHS backlog, and stopping the boats, stopping the illegal migration. But he's very fixated in crisis management because we have, as you say, bounced from one bad result to another, one scandal to another, one intractable problem to another. And when you're in crisis management, that's sort of almost the meat and drink for a government. It's the day-to-day job. But on top of that, in the same way that Graham was talking about the Labour Party have got to add an extra layer to their offer now for scrutiny as they enter government, we've got to add an extra layer of hope, aspiration, story, why we're doing this in the first place. We can't just do this just because we want to get elected for election's sake. This has got to be about a common purpose, about fulfilling Conservative principles.
Graham, it's not all a bed of roses for Labour, is it? Because Oldham, no overall control. Labour should really be picking up seats there. They're losing to Greens. They're losing to Independents. There seems to be a mixture of reasons, not least Gaza. And then, of course, we have Teesside, where the Tories have kept the seat for the local mayor. There's still much to do in the red wall, isn't there? Can Labour fix it?
I think we're looking at the big trends here rather than one or two isolated examples of Conservatives or other parties doing well. Actually, if you look at the numbers, the Conservatives have lost seats which have been picked up by absolutely every other party. Every other party has scored higher. The Conservative Party has been the place where they've sucked seats from. So I don't think that's anything to do with recent events in the last month or so, other than a couple of isolated places. I think that's to do with the fact that, Nick, you and I are longer in the tooth than Paul. He should enjoy it while he can. We've been around and seen that same old feeling around it's time to change the government. They've had a long spell. It was evident, I think, I'm old enough even to remember the Callaghan government, certainly evident in the Major government. And it's almost, you feel sorry for the person who's the incumbent Prime Minister at that time, because it's a tsunami coming towards them and they're in a little kayak and they just get swept along with this. And I think that's exactly what's happened.
Let me ask, if I may, Paul Scully, this one. No one in the Conservative Party will want to give up, but to be blunt, do you think the Conservatives can win a general election with Rishi Sunak as leader?
I'll be frank, I don't think we can win an election. And I don't, for the reasons that Graham's saying, I think people have stopped listening. So when I'm talking about the vision, it's about more how we are portraying ourselves, how we're actually going into that election as a grown-up party, actually trying to solve problems, trying to do the right thing by the country. I joined the party, the Conservative Party, in 1997, and it feels like I've gone full circle, really trying to get back to a Conservative majority and then see it all go again. I always fear that we're not going to learn our lessons and remember 97. There's not enough of us that have been around that had that mindset in 97 about rebuilding.
Okay,
but I don't think any leader can win the election.
So no
this
point
isn't
in
a matter of changing
leader.
Rishi and coming up with someone else.
Graham, Paul has effectively said he can't see the Conservatives winning the election. Was it necessary, and do you approve of the sort of tactics we saw in London when Wes Streeting, your shadow health spokesman, essentially accused his opponent of being white supremacist to win elections? Doesn't that make you feel a little bit ashamed of the Labour Party, particularly when your opponent here on the Conservative Party is saying you're probably going to win anyway?
I think our democracy's got to learn some lessons, and I'm not familiar with the individual case you mentioned, Nick, but I hope we'd all condemn people going to the extremes and just telling mistruths and misinformation. I think all of us in politics have got to look at the polls about all the parties, and there's a mistrust in our politics, there's a mistrust in our democracy, and I think it's incumbent upon myself as a former member, Paul as a current member, and many others, good people in all parties. The health of our democracy is certainly is more important than particular election results. And
an important message.
Precious thing needs looking after.
An important message from Graham there. But Paul, let me ask you, Reform very nearly, as you said, squeezed you into third place in Blackpool by-election. They're no longer a polling phenomenon, but one that is actually earning votes. We're going to be talking very shortly to the party's deputy leader, Ben Habib, in just a moment. Is there anything you, as a Conservative, losing votes to Reform, would say to him about the consequences of capturing your vote?
Well, I know Ben well enough to know exactly what his answer would be if I told him. But essentially, if you vote Reform, you're going to end up with a Labour government. But he will say that he actually, he wants to see the end of the Tory party. And actually, that goes back to what you were just talking about with Graham about Wes Streeting, because the problem is when you get what I've always seen, when you have politicians that want to destroy another party rather than just trying to win, inevitably they go too far. They lose their logic, and it never happens. We saw it with Gordon Brown at points, and we've seen in history. So where's talking about white supremacists, it really belittles the electorate, and we saw what happens when you do that over a number of years in the Brexit referendum, for example. But look, I would just say about Reform, they are there. They are a reflection of people's anger and frustration, but I don't see the solutions that they have for the bigger problems. Indeed, I don't see that from the Labour Party as well.
Paul, both Paul, Graham, thanks for joining me. We're going to put those points to Ben next. And as if by magic, here he is. Welcome, Ben Habib, Deputy Leader of Reform. Now, you just heard what Paul Scully, a former minister in the Conservative government, said. He challenged, if you like, the logic of wanting to smash the Tories. Richard Tice said in this studio when interviewed here that that was an objective. Is that still the objective?
So can I give you the provenance of the comment? I didn't want to get back into party politics. When the Brexit party kind of disbanded, I thought, right, that's me done. I'll campaign from the sidelines. I was delighted when Liz Truss was made Prime Minister because her agenda was one that I thought had a sporting chance of saving, the disastrous economy in which the United Kingdom now finds itself. And I was equally apoplectic when they defenestrated her, and I believe she was defenestrated. And so I felt the only way really to make an impact was to do it at the ballot box, which is the political democratic way to do things. But I was so incensed with the Conservative Party for...
Is that when you wanted to smash them?
And that's... So at the press conference when I was interviewed joining Reform UK in March 2023, someone said, are you going to be a pressure group for the Conservative Party? Are you going to do another deal with the Conservative Party like the Brexit Party did? And I stood up, actually, I wasn't even asked the question, I was sitting on the side. But I stood up and said, no, my aim is to obliterate the Conservative Party. And I felt that. When I say the Conservative Party, I don't mean the party, I mean the parliamentary party. It's with them I have my truck, because they've sat on those green benches. They were given a very clear mandate by the people in 2016 to deliver Brexit. And what we got was a, Brexit in name only, okay. and the country's in the trouble that it's in.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Let's go to March 2024, when we were beginning to gear up for the now finished Blackpool South by-election. At that point, you said on Times Radio, reform should be judged on how it fares in Blackpool South at the by-election rather than the local elections. Now, you very, very nearly came second, within 117 votes of dislodging the Tories at second. Let me put this to you, though, OK? A party that is in disarray, 25 points behind Labour, a candidate that was shamed and humiliated that he had to stand down for questionable practices, and yet you still came third. Is that good enough?
Well, first of all, we came third by just a smidgen, by 170 votes, and which is nothing in the scheme of things. But the defining difference still between us and what I call the two legacy parties is that everyone in the country knows who the Conservative Party and the Labour parties are. They all know who they are. We have twice the challenge, if you like, because we've got to get people to, first of all, know who we are, and not all the country knows who we are yet. And then having conveyed our existence to them, we have to convey our message, and they have to resonate with that message. So we've got a much bigger struggle to get heard. But what's remarkable about that by-election is that it is 4 percentage points ahead of what I achieved in Wellingborough a few months ago in that by-election. Massive increase in vote. And in October in Mid-Bedfordshire, we got under 5%. In Tamworth, we got around 5%. So we are making steady progress.
Absolutely agree with that. Yeah. And as I repeat that you are really beginning to match your polling. And you have had extraordinary polling, certainly in the last year particularly. Bottom line is, though, even in Blackpool South, you're not polling votes as well as UKIP did. Now, that says maybe the answer is Nigel Farage and not Richard Tice as leader.
No, I don't think it's that. I think the electorate, if you look at the turnout, which I think is critical in any analysis of the Blackpool South and indeed any of the other by-elections, looking at turnout, people are fed up with both the Labour Party and the Conservative Party.
But mainly Tories are going to. You are bleeding Tory votes very successfully.
I would say that we are undoubtedly taking some Conservative votes, but I think people who are voting for us, if they didn't, quite a number of people who vote for us, if they weren't to vote for us, if they didn't have us as an option on the ticket, I think they'd stay at home. I don't think this is a choice between the Conservative Party and us. I think people, as they become aware of our existence, I think you will see polling numbers rise and people say, and gain faith.
Again, a fair point. But let me ask you this final question, if I may. If at the end of this, and you repeat your performance in Blackpool South and elsewhere in a general election, you may still not end up with a single MP. Will it have been worth it?
Well, I just want to say one more thing. The difference between UKIP in 2015 and us now is that there was a popular Conservative Party then. And the Conservative Party at the moment is deeply unpopular. I think even the Conservative Party doesn't appreciate how toxic its brand is. And we're only just behind the Conservative Party in the national polls. If we can get ahead of them, I think you will see a seismic shift in the way the electorate will view us. And I think we will get seats. Against all the odds in a first-past-the-post system, I think we will get seats because the electorate is aware that this country needs a change in policies which are not marginal. We need a 180-degree change in direction.
Ben Habib, Deputy Leader of Reform, thanks for joining us here in the studios at Westminster Watch. And don't forget to subscribe to the TRT World YouTube channel for more lively debate and conversation. But for now, from me and all the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.